Hello, everyone. I'm Priya Rathnam, the director of the Shrewsbury Public Library. I'm very excited today to host the local author showcase. In past years, this has been a huge event at the library during the summer reading kickoff carnival. This year, we've adapted the virtual format, but it will be as much fun as it has been in the past. It's my pleasure to be hosting this showcase, and I'm going to have the authors on this panel to introduce themselves, and they'll tell you about the books that they have written. Lois, do you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Lois McAuliffe. I live right next to Shrewsbury in North Grafton, but I'm the children's librarian at the Ashland Public Library, where I've been for 20 years. And I've been a children's librarian for 45 years, so I have a lot of experience with children's books. So a few years ago, I wrote a couple of picture books. I'm currently working on my third picture book. The first one is about a hippopotamus because I've always loved hippos. It's just something, that's my favorite animal. So I wrote a story about hippos. I completely self-published it, did all the illustrations, did all the words, and published it. I did all the editing and everything myself. And I had so much fun doing that. I've always been an artist, so I had a lot of fun with that. So then after that one, I did another one. This one is about an aardvark, but the aardvark meets many other animals on her journey through Africa. So I had a lot of fun drawing all those animals. So then my third book, which is kind of on hold at the moment, but I've started working on it, is going to be an unusual animal alphabet so that I get to draw lots of other animals.
Thank you, Lois. That sounds like so much fun. Thank you. Fern, do you want to introduce yourself? You have to unmute.
There I am. Hi, my name is Fern Nissim. I live in Shrewsbury, and I'm a great follower of the Shrewsbury Library. And I have written a story that was actually written originally by my dad in 1977 for my children. And I decided finally at this point in my life to actually illustrate it, adapt it to today's world, and create it for my grandchildren. And it's called Anteline's Brave Adventure. It's a wonderful story about a little ant that seeks her freedom, that is tired of servitude and decides to strike out on her own and find out what the world is like. And it's a play on words that end with ant, that end in the word ant. And she meets all kinds of characters on her journey. One in particular might be the arrogant. Another may be the restaurant, and everything is a play on the word ants. And she's seeking her freedom, and the whole story is really, it was really started by my dad in 1977 as a story about his family's struggle to move to a country that was free and what they had to go through. And when he wrote it originally, the story was really difficult to understand for my young children. So I decided to update it and make it more into today's world with things that they could relate to and things that would be easy to digest. So it's a story of freedom for young children. So having taken and created the little story of Anteline, which was designed and the paintings actually were done also by my friend Sue Fleishman, who lives in Marlborough. I was hoping she could join us today. She may be able to a little bit later. Together we did all of the backgrounds and all of the drawings. I just wanted to show you quickly. So when we created this, Sue and I created the image of what Anteline would look like, and then I created botanical drawings to go in the background. I did a lot of studies on that. Finally got to do illustrations, which is something I always wanted to do my whole life, and finally got to really sit down and do it. So now we're working on the second book, which is called Anteline's True Discovery, in which Anteline, now that she's free, she's trying to figure out what it is she wants to do with her life. And this story is about tolerance, and she meets a taller ant. So she goes to the ancestry to find out what her background is and has a whole adventure there. So my goal is to really create a series of books. They're called the Little Red Ant series, and they're all about messages for children through Anteline the ant. And I'm having a blast doing it.
Oh, thank you, Fern. What an important topic, and you're making it accessible to younger readers. That's amazing.
seems to be more timely than ever today. Yes.
Thank you. David.
Hi, good morning, everybody here on this panel, and I don't know, good morning, good afternoon, or good night to anyone watching this online later on. I'm David Lee, and I've been writing since I was 7 years old, and it's been about 10 years. Currently, I'm a rising senior at Shrewsbury High, and evidently, I'm actually starting a college application process that's pretty fun. And for these 10 years, I've actually written this like kind of series of fun books. They're for elementary and middle schoolers. It's about a young inventor named Danny Hoopenbiller who gets into like a lot of these science fiction hijinks and adventures and misadventures as he kind of explores the different technologies and gets into the hair of like quite a few dinosaurs along the way. And actually, my most recent project has been a little bit of editing work on some of the work I'd done a few years ago, or when I was still in elementary school. And I compiled a couple of my books into this mega volume, which I felt would be kind of be my first novel in a sense, first novel-length book. It's a compilation of all the dinosaur action that Danny faces throughout the series. So honestly, my goal as a writer has been to kind of inspire others to like read and like believe that reading is like a fun thing to do. And hopefully if they have like a creative spark in their head, put it out onto the page. And I'm excited to hear about everyone else. So I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, David. I have known you since you were 6 or 7, I think, before you wrote your first book. And I feel so proud to see you now continuing in this journey as a writer, despite I know your very busy schedule at school and getting ready for college and all that. So thank you for joining us today. Laura, would you like to share something about your writing?
Yeah, so hi. It's really nice being here today with all these other talented authors. My name's Laura. I'm David's sister. I'm a rising sophomore at Shrewsbury High School, and I've been writing since the age of 10, and I've written this trilogy. So like, this is Two Worlds. Yeah, this is okay. This is a fantasy action adventure trilogy for young adults. And I published my first book when I was 10, and then my second book when I was 11, and this one came out when I was 13. And I feel like I was really inspired by a lot of fantasy authors like Harry Potter, like the Harry Potter series. And I think what really got me into writing was the Artemis Fowl series, because that one was exploring fantasy and science fiction, like a hint of technology, in a way that I thought was really cool. And now I'm actually moving on to science fiction. So after this trilogy, I'm starting a new book, which will be a science fiction young adult novel. So yeah.
Thank you, Laura. I'm sure your books will inspire other younger kids to take to writing too. Thank you.
Thank you.
April, do you want to talk about your books? I know you have a range of books for kids of all ages.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. Hello, everyone. And thank you to the library and to Priya for pulling this together, even though we couldn't be together in person. It's a really wonderful tradition that we have for our community. So my name is April Jones Prince, and I live in Shrewsbury, and I write books for young readers, and I also work at an agency that represents illustrators. So I don't illustrate myself, but I work closely with illustrators, and Lois and Fern, I have huge respect for your, and Sue, your illustrating abilities, because that's a whole nother thing. To be able to make a book and really sustain a story over those pages is really wonderful. So I do that, and then I also co-teach a picture book course at the Rhode Island School of Design for undergraduates. So books are really my world. I love visiting our Shrewsbury Public Schools and connecting with young readers. I do everything from board books for very little readers to picture books, both historical fiction and regular fiction. And I also do some biographies. So this is a popular series that Penguin does called Who Was, and now it's Who Is and Where Is and all different things. So I do a lot of work in the schools talking to kids about writing biographies and getting them excited to write their own stories. My most recent book came out in November and it's called Snowy Race, and you can guess what it was inspired by: walking out our front doors. And I did a lot of research, even though it's a fictional tale, and the Shrewsbury Highway Department was really fabulous in terms of answering all my questions. It's funny how you guys have probably experienced this too. When you're writing fiction, you still end up doing a lot of research about your topic, right? So very grateful to have a supportive community. So thanks again for being here. I really look forward to learning about your books too.
Thank you so much, April. I know you wear many hats. You're an author, you are kind of an educator because you go to schools and libraries and inspire kids to read and write. So
yes,
yeah, thank you for
favorite hat.
Thank you for all that you do. Thanks. Charles, do you want to tell us about your self-help books?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Or as David said, good afternoon or good evening, whatever time you watch this. I wrote all these books on self-help. You can see them here or see them back there. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, and I was a private investigator and a security consultant. And that's where my first book came from, teaching people self-protection through using their heads instead of using their fists, how to think your way out of a situation. And then this book, Operation Tip, I've had PTSD since I was 6 years old. And I've also ran a bunch of different programs for people in recovery and people that have post-traumatic stress in a various amount of places like Jeremiah's Inn, Veterans Inc. And that program actually became this book. And then this is kind of like it's called Operation Happy Mind, but it's kind of a continued part of Operation Tip. It's got more about positive thinking and mindfulness and wellness, all that in it. And then last year I wrote, this is actually the first book that I sat down and wrote as a book. And the other ones I wrote as programs, but this I wrote as a book. I've been in recovery since 1993, long-term recovery. So I wrote my story in there. I wrote other people's stories in there. Like 8 or 9 people offered their recovery stories for this book. And I also put in the 8 dimensions of wellness. And with the 8 dimensions of wellness, I put in coping skills for each one of the dimensions. And I wrote how people become addicted. So it's a great book for anybody starting out in addiction recovery. And then this one, a lot of people wonder what my lifelong experience is. So I started writing a book about every 10 years. And this one has the first 10 years of my life. That's me in the picture. And it has from my mother passing away, my father passing away when we were out in Texas, and all my family's here. Then I was orphaned, and then I came home to Massachusetts. But during my time out west, it tells about all the bullying that I was experienced to literally because of the color of my skin. I was in Van Horn, Texas, and I was one of the only white kids in the school. And then I was on a Navajo reservation, and I was one of the only white kids on a Navajo reservation. Yeah, and just a bunch of different things that I went through in that first 10 years of my life. Yeah, and if you you're interested in my books, they're on lifelongexperience.net. And I've been running a bunch of different promotions. Like I have free Kindles every now and then. I reduce the prices during COVID season, what I call COVID season, which hopefully is going to end soon. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for sharing your personal stories, and thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Robin, I know you've written books for children and adults, or mostly for children, I guess. But one of the most inspirational books I think that you've written is about breaking barriers and playing Little League soccer as a young girl. As a young girl, so really fascinated with that story. Would you like to tell us about your other books and that book?
Yes, well, my first book was on playgroup time, and it was the first book written about early intervention playgroup because my son went, and when they came to me saying that he may need it, so he screened out, I asked if they had any information about it, and all they gave me was a brochure. But I wanted to see like what was it about, what did they do, and there was nothing out there. So I decided to put this together to give a little story about what it is and that it's inclusive, any child can go for the play group, and it's great because kids are just kids and everybody's having fun. And I wanted to educate parents to decrease, to allay their anxiety that there's no shame to go into an early intervention play group for babies 0 to 2. And then I written about 3 Best Friends. That's about the need for inclusive playgrounds, because right now in Shrewsbury, Dean Park is not handicap accessible for the children who have mobility impairments. They have wood chips, and so is school playgrounds. And so I wanted to write about a child that goes to a playground that has wood chips that gets excluded and bullied because he's different. So I'm just trying to educate others about the importance of having inclusive playgrounds so nobody feels left out. But always cost seems to be a matter. And then this one is the one Priya was talking about. This is about my memoir playing Little League Baseball in 1975. See, before that, girls weren't allowed. It was actually illegal in the United States. There was a lawsuit from New Jersey, and the person was a girl who got kicked off the team in 1972. And she, the National Organization of Women sued on behalf and won. And President Ford signed the law, had to be a federal law, believe it or not, on December 31st, 1974, that allowed girls to play Little League across the nation. Now, the thing is, I thought it would be easy playing Little League because, you know, I was a 9-year-old kid, grew up in the city of New York. And I said, oh, no big deal, but I was wrong because I was, you know, I faced a lot of harassment, bullying, I was booed at, I was cursed at, and it showed me how I wanted to inspire kids, because kids today are not growing up with resiliency like they did in my days. So it's really important to inspire children that if you have dreams and people tell you you can't, or kids make fun of you, that you can accomplish your dreams in life. And this book actually helped me grow resiliency in life to adulthood. But it's really good. It's also a nice historical nonfiction for any kids out there looking for a book to read for school. And also kids learn about nowadays how we didn't have, you know, the electronics. We only had 3 TV stations, and we had to find things to do to keep busy. But it's a nice historical fiction, hopefully inspire girls to play baseball, because right now there is a national-wide as well as a worldwide to get girls back in baseball. In Massachusetts, we have the Boston Slammers, which is a women's baseball team. So yes, girls can play baseball. It's just that they're told to play softball, but they're capable of playing baseball. And then our last book was with my son. Come over here. This is EJ.
Hi.
How old were you when you wrote this?
8.
Yep, this is called The Stray, and it's about our dog Woody, rescuing Woody. It's a nice, colorful book that we got an illustrator to do. It's about how we found him and about how he was abandoned and how he was roaming the streets of Shrewsbury when they picked him up and how we found him. So EJ wanted to write about his story of adopting Woody. our dog Woody. Come over here. Do you want to say anything about it?
No.
Huh?
Just say hi, buddy.
He's trying to get our dog to say hi. But anyway, so that's our book. And our next book coming out with COVID is called The Runaway. And it's about a story about the second day we had Woody, how he ran away and how it took him 3 hours to find him. 3 to 4 hours. So I wrote about that because that book tells the story about what people go through when the dog is missing, the anxiety, the not knowing what's happening to your dog. And not much is written about the process. So I was happy that we were able to write that to educate others. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin, for being a role model for promoting inclusion and diversity. And thank you to EJ for making a guest appearance.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dhriti, do you want to tell us about your book? It's on adventure and fantasy. Is that the genre of your book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hi everybody. It was really awesome to hear about all your books. My name is Dhriti and I am a rising sophomore at Northeastern University. I've been writing basically ever since I was like in preschool or kindergarten. I'd like come home and make little picture books, and I think that's kind of like where my love for writing sort of originated. And so earlier this year, I published my first novel, Double Edged, and this is kind of a young adult fantasy. And I kind of read a lot of this genre like in school, in high school, and I decided to kind of give writing my own novel a shot because it's something I've always wanted to do. I did it when I was in India, and I had a lot of free time on my hands, and so I just sort of like wrote one chapter every day until it eventually turned into a book. And yeah, that's basically, I'm working on a couple of new projects at the moment, which are also fantasy, but they're kind of going a little bit slow right now because, there's a lot going on right now. I'm taking a couple of summer classes, but yeah, I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Dhriti. And glad to know you're continuing with your writing and coming up with new books. Abby, you're part of the Sutton Writers Group, right? I think that's how I met you last year.
Yes.
Could you tell us about your books? Yes.
All right. So my name is Abby Obamano, and I'm an educator in Worcester Public Schools, also a minister, and obviously an author. So I also write poetry. I've written 4 children's books. Really, my inspiration is just being able to teach kids social skills, and I want kids to be educated and have a wealth of social intelligence, emotional intelligence, to be kind to one another, to be compassionate, and all the things that comes with kindness, love, and respect. So my first book was about building kids' self-esteem. It's called The End of the Day. We all know that self-esteem is a building block, for children to be able to learn and flourish. So then I wrote helping each other climb, being able to share and help one another, teaching kids how to help each other. And the next one is, my name is, oh, I picked the wrong one. My name is Anita, and not the autistic girl. So a lot of times people address children with autism like the autistic boy. No, they do have names. And also in this book, I'm educating adults and children on how to treat children with disabilities, especially autism. And so making awareness and acceptance is really, really important, how children relate to each other. Okay. So it's not one size fits all, but at least I want the children and adults to have a general idea of how you treat children with autism. And the next one is about bullying. Bullying is, say no to bullying. So I just wanted to use this medium to educate kids on how not to bully each other, just to be friendly and respect each other. So then my adults one is a compilation of about, I think it's 17 stories. It's about social justice and also helping each other. If we're in this, for example, we're going through this pandemic, if we all help each other, we'll pull through this. Then I've written poetry too. My theme is around compassion, kindness, humility, empathy, and all that stuff. So, and I'm very glad to be here to meet all of you wonderful, talented authors. And thank you so much, Priya. Did I say your name correctly? For inviting me.
Priya.
I'm really proud. Thank you. I'm
Thank
glad
you,
to be
Evie.
here.
Thank you,
so
Evie.
much.
Yeah, great values that we cannot overemphasize, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, I'm glad you were able to join us. Fern told us about the co-authored books, or I'm not sure if you're the illustrator and Fern's the author of the books that you've written.
Basically, Anseline's Brave Adventure, I created the character of Anseline, and I have a little picture of her right here. We were sitting at her dining room table and playing with ideas and just sketching, and I came up with a few ideas and I kept working on it. And Anseline basically grew. And then in the second book, which we are also working on, and it's almost finished, Anseline finds a place and she has a bunch of friends. And I started doing some little sketches of little ants doing different things. And Anseline grew in personality, so she could look scared and she could look happy and she could be connecting with the other little characters in the book. And it was a way to share the idea that when you come to a new place, you try to fit in as best as you can and try to find out who you can connect to. And that's what the first story is about. It's her journey and meeting all these little characters and how she reacts to them and tries to find a place for herself, which kind of hooks into the idea of immigration and finding a new home in a new place.
Thank you. A great collaborative work by the two of you. Thanks. So I have a few questions to ask of all of you. And I'm going to be like the moderator at a presidential debate and say, let's make it quick answers because I want to give everyone a chance to speak. And I'm sure our audience wants to hear from all of you. So my first series of questions is what, when, where, how questions. So what is the purpose of your writing? Do you write because you have the strong urge to write? Do you write to educate readers? Or do you have a message that you're passionate about and that you want to communicate? So that's the what. When do you like to write? Morning, night, midday? What's your best time? And where do you like to write? Do you have a favorite spot in your house? Or do you have a cabin in the woods? Or what's your favorite? Where do you like to write? And the fourth one is, how do you write? Do you write longhand like Stephen King? Or do you type on your computer? So these are my 4 questions, and I would love to hear all your answers. Lois, do you want to start?
So, hang on a second, I gotta fix my views here. I pretty much have written my books just because they were in me and I had to get them out. I have been a creative writer since I was a kid, but I never really did anything with it. When I was in college, I had a story that I tried writing and illustrating, and at that point, I actually sent it to publishers and got many rejections and just sort of shelved it. And then I've used my skills as a children's librarian to, you know, express myself and show the kids like that amateurish story or whatever. But then with self-publishing coming along, it was like, oh, I could really do something with my story now. I am the type of person who edits and edits and edits and edits. If I'm writing an email, I probably make 8 drafts of an email. So my books got about 30 drafts. I do it mostly in longhand. I'm old school. Then I put it into the computer and tweak it. But basically I have all these pages of crossed out things and changed things and rearranged things. With my first book, it was all about just hippos, and I already knew a lot about hippos. So both of my books are picture books with nonfiction elements. That's the new trend in picture books. So there's facts about the hippos as well as a story about the hippos. And then with the second book, I decided to explore a bunch of other animals in the same part of Africa, but I didn't know things about them. So I did lots and lots of research before I even started. All of my illustrations, I do love to draw and everything, but I have to draw from photographs or from looking at something. So all of my illustrations are based on actually looking at a specific photograph. The animal's got to be turned in the right direction for my photograph, for my drawing to come out right. If they're curled up sleeping, I have to see a picture of an animal curled up sleeping. I don't have the talent to make the proportions and everything come out right. I usually work in my armchair in my living room. I have a full-time job, so I don't have a lot of choice about when. It's usually in the evenings or on the weekends. I do a lot of my editing at my computer, obviously, but most of my drawing and my writing actually take place in my armchair. I forget, was that all the questions? Was there something else you said?
I think you answered all of them. What, when, where, and how. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Fern?
Let's see if I can remember all of them now. Okay, well, I write primarily because I've been inspired early on by my dad and his stories about our family coming to America. And I was inspired by that, but also I'm a big collector of children's illustrated books. I've been collecting golden books. I have over 500 golden books from whenever. And I always dreamed about being an illustrator. I never really thought about being a writer until I started putting the two together. And now I realize that it's kind of it's a mutually exclusive kind of a thing. You have to be able to visualize what you're going to do with the drawing if you're going to be writing. So it needs to be worked out together. Working in a partnership with Sue Fleishman has been great because I've been able to focus on the things that I wanted to focus on in the illustrative part. While she's focusing on the main character, I've been focusing on the backgrounds. And in doing that, I started studying, taking all kinds of garden pictures and botanicals, and was inspired even more by artwork related to botanicals that I had never really taken a look at. So as I started to develop this character, I began to realize that the character itself has such a message to it that it needs to be carried on. So we began this concept of doing it in a series. Now I work primarily late afternoon. I find after the craziness of the day, I still work part-time in real estate, and after the craziness of the day and the afternoon sun is just right, I can sit down at my kitchen table, believe it or not. I have a studio, but I find it better to work, the light is better at the kitchen table, and I can start to actually draw out what I want. Sometimes I'll use some of the photographs that I've taken. Sometimes I'll look at the old picture books and get inspired, and then I'll think of the words relative to how that works with the illustrations. So that helps me. I've been working in rhyme mostly right now, and these books are in rhyme and playing on words, as I mentioned before. In the Antlion series, it's always a play on ants. And I think that the important thing is, from what I've discovered, is that I want these books to be conversation starters for families. There's 2 points right now that I feel are most important that families need to talk about and be engaged at. And that is helping children understand their heritage and the importance of freedom, how their family came to this country. And that's big for me right now. I think that it's such an important story, especially with America going through everything that it's going through right now. The second story is connectivity and tolerance, and the importance that everyone has a story to tell about their own lives. And then by learning about other people's stories, it breaks down the diversity between people. So those two things have been motivating factors in me writing. I write on my computer. I find that's the best. And then I'm inspired by the world around me. And I try to create messages that will start conversations for families to really open up and teach and learn. And hopefully the kids will get some kind of an inspiration from it too. Did I answer all your questions?
You did. Thank you. Excellent. And like you said, such relevant, timely topics. These are timeless topics, actually.
The diversity one right now is so critically important. And it's such a simple thing. And I think this is something Sue and I have been really working hard at. We've collaborated on this story together. The first one basically was my dad's concept. The second book we're working on is really a collaboration between the two of us. And we've done a lot of research on our own family histories. And we find that the more you learn about your own history and the more you learn about other people's history and family stories, it just breaks down all of those barriers.
Sure. Thank you. So would you like to add something, or Fern's pretty much covered everything? Yes.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Basically, I'm not so much for the writing, but I get my inspiration from looking at pictures of children doing things like playing, and I do the gestural drawing so I can make my little characters moving, through Anteline's world. And one of the things you asked about is, where you work. Behind me is my drafting table. I'm sitting in a very nice little area where I have several tables and all my art supplies. Or I sit in my dining room. It has a beautiful bay window overlooking the trees. And sometimes I get my best inspiration just when I wake up. I can picture exactly what I want to put down on paper in my mind, and I can't wait to get down to my drafting table. And so basically the inspiration comes from that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was going to be one of my questions. If you get these images that inspire you to write, or do you start writing and then, create the images? But you've answered that question. Thank you. David, do you want to tell us about your motivation for writing, sorry?
Of course. I'm kind of like Lois in that I have a creative spark. I have a lot of ideas just bubbling in my head, and I kind of have to let them out. So it's actually the process I do. I'm pretty flexible about the time of day. I've written good stuff that I felt was satisfactory in the morning, afternoon, and all the way up to midnight. And in terms of the place to write, I've actually written in quite a few places around the house, when I'm out traveling, for example. So I'm kind of flexible in that regard. One thing I do prefer is to type. I'm not really a huge fan of writing out in longhand. And I'm a pretty fast typer, so I can just hammer out like a paragraph. And then basically my process for writing is that I write a few chapters, and then I'll just they'll kind of be like my proof of concept chapters, and I'll just keep editing them to establish character and make sure that all my plot points and the plot beats that I'm trying to put in there are all like in place and correct, and with a certain level of professionalism and kind of a quality that I demand of myself as a writer. And I honestly, the purpose of my writing is to primarily like entertain the people that I intend as my audience. And I want to give them like a fun story, and I want to lead by example for them. And if they ever wanted to write, I want to like kind of show to them that they also can like pick up a pen or grab a keyboard and a laptop and start writing. So that's kind of been my purpose all along through these 10 years. And I've had a lot of fun doing that, of course. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, David. You sound like a perfectionist. Laura, would you like to talk about your process of writing?
Sure. So I write usually at night actually because I'm not a morning person at all, and I usually study in the afternoons. But the thing is, I usually get ideas as I'm trying to sleep, which does not help you sleep. But I don't usually think of. I usually forget to put them like in my computer until nighttime, and I do type on a computer because writing for me, I type a lot faster than I write. But when I edit, I print out a draft and go through it with a pen, and then I put in the changes to my computer, and then maybe I'll print out another draft again. Because I find that reading things on the screen, I tend to miss things more, and that leads to some more typos, grammatical errors, and also it's kind of hard to put notes in the margins, like if I want to change something later. And I usually write in my room because I prefer quiet when I write, and like kind of like an environment I'm very familiar with and comfortable with. And I write because, like David, I want to entertain people. I want to inspire people. And my books, actually, a lot of the characters are female. And I kind of want to show that sort of like female strength, I guess. And I also like talk about like through like conflicts you can have like friendship. And it's like so my books, there's always a theme, like a common theme of there's a main conflict, but through this conflict, maybe people who are like enemies, they have some differences. They have to set those differences aside to like face the common like conflict. And yeah, did I answer all your questions?
You did, Laura. Thank you. And you're so mature. I'm really inspired. Thank you. April, would you like to tell us about your what, when, where, how?
Absolutely. Let's see if I can hit everything. I think that I am most drawn to stories, like you said, like I really love history. This is a book that's based on a true story of P.T. Barnum and the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge in 1883. I love taking like little nuggets of history and sort of boiling them down. And I think I'm really drawn to stories, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, of people where like society said, well, you can't do that, right? I mean, like, you can't play Major League Baseball. Yes, you can. You know, like people who said, I can do this and we should do this. And just sort of relaying those stories, I think, is inspiring for all of us to think about how we deal with the challenges in our own lives. So I also tend to use a lot of wordplay. Like I loved hearing about Ferd's play on the word ant, and you know how you're factoring that into your books and how it adds a whole nother layer when you're able to do that. I think, and Ibby might relate to this too, like in writing poetry, there's a quote from Robert Frost that says, you know, like if you're writing poetry is like playing tennis. If you're not writing poetry, it's like playing tennis without a net, right? Like, so it's like, it gives you a structure, right, to sort of like work within. So it's a little bit like a game, and it's fun to play with that. And I think to inspire other people to play with words and language too. I tend to write best sort of first thing in the morning, although I'm not a morning person either. I'm much more of a night owl. But I think that if you can launch into your writing before you check your email and before you check your phone and all of those things, it can be really good because you're fresh and you're not sort of thinking about all those elements of the day. I have taken over the dining room table is where I write now. I don't have an office. So it's a great place to spread out. It's not so cohesive to big dinners, but we're not entertaining these days anyway. So I tend to write first drafts always by hand, even just on blank printer paper or a legal pad, because I think there's something really tangible about writing, you know, writing with your favorite pen and your favorite paper. and getting ideas out that way. And then I'll transfer over to the computer at some point. But it's really project specific. Like I find that I approach different projects in different ways. A project that I'm working on now, I actually made a little dummy book and then this is the first time I had actually written right into the book, because I think I really love picture books, and the art of the picture book and the way a picture book is really different from any other. It's not a coffee table book, it's not a storybook, it's really an interaction between the words and the pictures and the way each of them tell part of the story. So the pacing and the page turns are really important because they convey a sense of time. You know, there's a lot of things that you might foreshadow in the illustrations that aren't mimicked in the text, right? It's just a really special art form. So, so picture books are my favorite. And I think sometimes by making a dummy like that, you know, like Laura said, there's things on the screen that you miss. It's very different when you have a tangible thing in your hand. So yeah, so I just, every project is kind of its own animal. Thank you.
Thank you, April. I've converted my formal dining table into my workspace too. Now that
highly recommended. How many piles do you have all over?
all over, yes. Luckily, you can only see this part. You can't see all the stuff spread out.
You can't go back to a desk once you spread out and take it over. There's no going back.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, April. Charles, do you want to talk about the process of writing?
Sure. Go back 3 years ago, I never thought of being an author. I was running programs, and when I was done running those programs, I wanted to keep the information out there for people, and I found that I could do it online, so I created the books online. And then Lisa Shea actually reached out to me, I think 2 years ago, and invited me to a Barnes & Noble event. And I went to that and with my books, and I found out that my books sell. So then a lot of people wanted to read them, and a lot of people wanted to know more about me and my books. So I had her redo the covers. I wish I had the original covers with me here, but these three were just like half the books that they are now, really. So then last year I did a lot of work, or last couple of years I did a lot of work in addiction recovery. So I wrote, I actually sat down for the first time and wrote a book like out, and I write on my computer. I have a desk because I'm in college, so I write them on my desk, and then people wanted to know more about my life, so I started writing my memoirs. But I actually, how I write them, like, let me see if I can find a part in here. Like I wrote about physical wellness, but then after I write something, I want the reader to think about what I'm writing. So I made them into workbooks. And then I put a lot of questions for people to answer on the next page, so they can actually think about what they're reading, you know, and get something out of it. And I find that's really helpful for people. So that's why, what are the other ones?
Oh, where do you write? When do you write? When do you like to write?
I do a lot of homework too, so I write when I can. I don't really have a set time, especially in the fall and the spring. I write at my desk, and I use my computer to write everything. I have a thing that I save all my stuff on, but I normally just write on my computer on my desk at home.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charles.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dhriti, do you have any idiosyncrasies, or are you just a regular writer?
Honestly, in terms of like when I write, I write like anytime I get the time to write, honestly, but I prefer to write in the morning because I feel like at night I'm kind of just like tired and my writing isn't as good as it would be in the morning. In terms of why I write, I've always like loved to read to sort of get like lost in a different world. And that's kind of why I write too. Like my book is a fantasy about this like war that takes place. And so I sort of want like the people who read my book to sort of feel like they can also get lost in these fictional worlds and have sort of this like break from reality a little bit. How I write, I like to type. I think my writing it out would take me forever, so I prefer to type it. But I think for editing, kind of like what Laura and April said, it's better to print it out and just sort of like make comments in the margins and stuff like that. What were the other two? It was like, did I get all of that, or is there anything I'm like missing?
I think you did. It was breaking up a little, but I think you covered all of it. I don't know if there's something technology issue at my end, but are you all able to hear properly?
Yes.
No, it said that my internet connection was. Yeah, it said that. I think it's on my end. I think my internet connection is unstable, but I think I didn't do where I like to write in my room because it's just sort of like where it's the most quiet and it's like a familiar environment. So it's like nice to write there. I feel like if I wrote somewhere else, it would just be like weird.
Thank you. Robin, would you like to tell us about your writing experience?
Yes, I like to write books that educate others. I wanted to write about, disabilities, these two, because there's not many out there. I actually wrote Playgroup Time in this room. This is a family room, which becomes a conference during the week for my husband and I meetings. And I wrote it after I became a mom, because I adopted my son and I needed a mental health break. And I've been thinking for a few years to write Playgroup Time, so I finally found the time to write. I'm on TV. I've been on TV 21 years, and I first started about promoting disability awareness and sensitivity. So I said, well, I'd like to write some books on inclusion and diversity, which I did. I wrote it all out on paper, even though I can't read my own handwriting after I write it out, and then I type it. And then my last two books, Breaking Barriers and The Stray, I wrote upstairs in the living room. I tend to write more in the mid-afternoon at night. I'm not a morning person. I just can't. I even getting up to take my son to middle school at 7:15 in the morning, that's a big deal for me. And I tend to just do it when I have the time. I mean, it's a hobby for me. It's not a full-time job. I teach at a college and I'm a counselor in private practice. Besides being a mom and a wife and a dog owner. And to me, it's more cathartic for me to write. I don't have the brain to do friction or the brain to do the rhyming words. I just never did because I had a learning disability. And I've always been told since I was young that I don't have the ability to write or to read. I remember in graduate school, the advisor told me I would never get a PhD. So I always had that in my mind that I wasn't a good writer, but I decided to overcome that by writing books that I enjoy doing and educating others. And I thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Robin. And I appreciate your grit and resilience.
Yes, thank you.
Patience, thank you for joining us. And could you quickly tell us about what is the purpose of your writing? When do you like to write? Where do you like to write? What is your favorite spot in the house or some place, ideal place where you get inspired to write? And how do you write? Whether you write in longhand or you like to type on your computer. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you all virtually. Thank you for the opportunity for having me join you. I was on another panel, so I had to jump over. So thank you for your patience. What made me write? So I was experiencing an unfair situation being an immigrant traveling here, so there was a lot of disparities and things that I wasn't used to. And I was bottling them inside, and it was causing me to have some health issues. And I kept frequenting the ER too much. And I realized that this is not the life I want to live. I want to be productive as a mom, a spouse, and to my community and the work that I'm being paid to do. But I end up spending most of my time in the ER. So I started asking questions, other people, other women. Is this something that happens to you? Do you have panic attacks all the time, feeling all these things? And they were like, yeah, it's true. It's normal. We feel it all the time. And these are things we do to cope with it. And there was a long list of medications. And I, having my master's in biotechnology, knowing how we do new drugs and what we do behind the scenes. Whilst I was taking the class, I knew I don't want to be part of at the end of it. So I said, oh, thank you for showing me the list, but I have to find something else that works for me. So then writing the book was my release or my purging, saying that oh, this is what is happening to me. And this is what I have done, this is what I have found, and this is what can help you too. So like Charles said, after writing this, I decided to do a workbook, which is I Breathe. So you'll be able to actually write in it and do the exercises and actually, it's a coloring book too. So you get to color whilst you write to help you cope. So that is my why. And then where do I like to write? Thanks to COVID, I changed one of the bedrooms into an office. So actually, the room wasn't being occupied. You know how when you move into a new place, you have boxes sitting? So this room was being paid for boxes. And I'm like, boxes gotta go. I'll change it into a sanctuary. So I love this new place. Before it became an office, I love writing on my bed. It was my office. My bed was my office. I feel like I'm rested and in my sanctuary when I'm in my bed. So it flows more. I'm a content creator all the time, getting content because I listen to my clients and the people that I interact and see what they are looking for and go find it and make it easier, accessible to them. So that is what motivates me to write. And the other thing I found that is easier is actually recording what I want to write. So there are apps that would would transcribe them for you. So it's easier. Like if you do not have the time of day to actually sit and write everything, you just record it and then it will transcribe it for you. Of course, with my accent, there will be some typos and then you can go in and then do the little edits. So I find that to be very helpful and the quicker way you can do it whilst you are taking a lunch break or something. It's not about your voice, it's about the transcript. So it helps to get a lot done in a little while. Did I answer every question?
You did. Thank you. And I love the way you describe your bedroom as your sanctuary. Yeah, your home should be a sanctuary, right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. E.B., would you like to tell us about your experiences?
Definitely. All right, so I already talked about my inspiration and, I write serious things. I write about, social justice, but I also make it, reader friendly. I don't want to take serious things and make it too serious and people, just object to reading it. And I hope that through my writing, people can find, healing and hope. So when do I write? I'm a night owl. And I write better at night. So I don't write during the day because I don't like my writing to, except for the summer, interfere my work. So I put my work aside and 6 o'clock, have dinner, and believe it or not, I don't want to tell you what time I go to bed. So I think better at night, and it just is something about the calmness at night. I think better and it flows. But there are things that I do during the day. If I'm driving, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm old school, so I'm not, like patience with, all the apps. So I just park and I write. There are times I write shorthand, so I do longhand, okay? But I write shorthand, and at night I try to read my shorthand. I say, what was that? what did I just write? So, but anyway, I enjoy writing because it just gives you an avenue to inform, and entertain people at the same time. I just don't know if I covered every questions that you asked,
You did.
I write in my living room. So I found the corner of my living room very refreshing to write from. So
Thank you. Thank you, EB.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. I had a lot of questions, but I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask 2 quick questions of all of you. You're all writers, so I'm sure you love to read too. So who's your favorite author and what's your all-time favorite book? Who would like to go first? I know it's difficult to pick one all-time favorite book, but please try. Yes. Anyone? Sure, Fern.
All-time favorite book is Little Women. I have to say, Louisa May Alcott has been one of my heroes. And what I love about it is that she was inspired by her family and her surroundings in the stories that she wrote. And her sister, May Alcott, is my favorite artist. She's an incredible artist. She's not well known, unfortunately. I think maybe now people are starting to realize what an artist she really was. She was an inspiration to some great artists, including French, who did the memorial for Lincoln, and others. People don't even know that May Alcott was an inspiration for so many other artists, including the beginning of the Hudson Valley Art Colony. But Louisa May Alcott definitely is my favorite.
Oh, thank you. I learned something today. I have to research May Alcott.
Yes.
Thanks. Lois?
Well, as a children's librarian, it's like impossible to say what's my favorite all-time book. My current favorite all-time book is it's a picture book called Library Lion, written by Michelle Knudsen. And I actually choke up every time I read that. It's a more recent book, but it's done in the style of Robert McCloskey's Make Way for Ducklings. It reminds me of that nostalgic kind of a book that I grew up with, like Blueberries for Sal is probably another one of my favorites. I couldn't begin to tell you what my favorite novel is. Everybody's asked me that forever, what was my favorite book growing up? And my answer has usually been, I was so surrounded with reading and books that nothing stands out as a favorite because I was just immersed in books so much that usually things that stand out are the unique things. And it was like reading was just so much a part of my life and my family's life that I don't have anything that stands out, but I'm just so surrounded by books all the time that things keep changing. So.
I understand completely as a fellow librarian. Today's favorite book, right? That's how it is.
Yeah, right now my favorite is, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. David, do you have an all-time favorite?
Consistently, my favorite author has been probably Stephen King, because I find it amazing that someone can kind of just push out such a humongous body of work. And I like to read a Stephen King story. Like, I just get engrossed in all his prose and his characters. And he loves to write stories set in like New England towns. Like, I believe he like made up a couple of towns, like specifically just for stories and characters. And it's super fun to kind of delve into the mythology of kind of his horror. I'm actually a stickler for nonfiction memoirs. I like fiction, but I like memoirs a lot. And I actually liked Just Mercy. I believe there's a movie that came out, but I don't have a copy of that right now. So actually, one of my other favorite memoirs is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. And I believe this was actually a copy from the library that was actually, those were distributed out. And I actually got a copy of that. And I thought it was a really powerful and moving kind of story of this doctor's experiences. with these people who are kind of on the last years of their lives. And it kind of opened my worldview to kind of like made me feel a little more empathetic kind of as a person. So that would kind of be one of my favorite books of all time for that reason.
Thank you, David. Yeah, like you, I'm in awe of writers like Stephen King, who can just churn out books, almost one every month. I'm not sure how many books he's written. Really in awe of such people. April?
This is probably the toughest question you could have posed to us, right? All of us, because we're all such big readers. I would say for favorite authors, recently I've been reading a lot of Jason Reynolds, who's writes mostly middle grade and young adult, but he really has an authentic voice and is really dealing with topical issues like gun violence and racial inequality and different things. And really, I think when we think about books as windows and mirrors, right, it can be a window onto other experiences that you haven't had yourself. And I think those are I tend to read more windows than mirrors, which are a reflection of more of your own experience. So I feel like I've learned a lot from reading him. But I also love history, so I love David McCullough and Doris Kearns Goodwin, and when I'm in a nonfiction bent. As a child, my favorite books, I had a favorite book called The 14 Bears in Summer and Winter. So it was like a picture book that had 2 stories inside it, and these bears all lived in hollow trees, and they were like cutaways of the trees, and each tree was different, like had a different decor, different thing going on. So I think just like projecting yourself into those spaces. And my other favorite, of course, was April's Kittens by Claire Newberry, because obvious reasons. I have a lot of favorite picture book creators that are contemporary, John Klassen, like people who really have a lot of humor and really play with the picture book form. So yeah, hard to pick a favorite, but have a little collection, a little basket of favorites. Good question. You're gonna have to answer this too, Priya.
Oh gosh, I
Prepare
should
yourself.
have thought of that before I asked you the question. Oh, thank you. Charles, do you have a favorite author?
I actually have a big confession to make. I don't do a whole lot of reading. Because of my post-traumatic stress, I can read a page, shut the book, and not tell you what I read. If I'm doing like a private investigation or security, then I'm focused. But if I read, I'm not. I actually got through most of college without picking up a book. I do a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of videos on the subjects, but that's how I get the knowledge that I require. It's just how I am, but at least that shows that if you want to be an author, you don't have to be able to read a lot. You just got to be creative in getting the knowledge that you need. Yeah. I love Stephen King. I love different authors, but I watch their movies, or I'll sit down and I'll listen to an audiobook, something like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles. Yeah, there are so many different formats nowadays available. And if you read an article on the phone, it's still reading. So
exactly.
Yeah, we actually do read a lot, all of us, I think, even if we don't pick up a book, a 1,000-page book, we are reading all the time on our phones or tablets, and links that somebody posts. So that's reading too. Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you. Dhriti?
I guess in the past couple of years, I really started to like Agatha Christie. I love how she just sort of like keeps you on your toes, and you have to kind of follow the history along with the detectives. So I think that's a lot of fun to read. I love the TV series too. They're all lots of fun for me. I guess in terms of a favorite book, I can't really say. I know growing up, I really liked the Harry Potter series, but other than that, it's kind of hard to pick a favorite book because it keeps changing, and I don't even remember all the stuff I've read in the past. And so I think it's hard for me to like say that I really, really like one book over other books, really.
Thank you. I'm glad you discovered Agatha Christie. She used to be one of my favorite authors when I was growing up. Yeah, thank you.
My parents love her too. Her books are so much fun.
Right, yeah. And growing up in India, we had access to more British authors, so Agatha Christie. And to answer April's question, when I was growing up, my first introduction to reading was through Enid Blyton's books. Enid Blyton was the British author whose books were accessible in India, and it was ubiquitous. We had very limited access to books, I would say, but her books were available, and she wrote adventure and mystery, and it was in a foreign setting. Of course, it was boarding schools in England or this countryside in England, but I just got so much delight by reading those books, and my love of reading, my love for the English language, I think has come because of my reading of Enid Blyton's books. So I owe a lot to her. And then, of course, through the years, I've had many favorites, and it keeps changing and evolving. So, AB, do you want to tell us about your favorite author?
To be honest, I don't have a favorite. I just read any information, any work that is inspiring, and I will finish the book. If I pick up a book and, I don't find it fulfilling, I'm not one that picks up a book and just makes a decision after the first 3 chapters, but I read a little bit and get in the middle, and I'm like, okay, I'm not really getting anything from this. And recently purchased a book by Viktor Frankl, and so I'm yet to finish reading it. And the few that I've read so far is inspiring. I don't know if you know about him, and he went through concentration camp and, went through a lot with his family, lost family members, but the grace, he always believed that, grace and love would see him through, and he made it. So it's a good read. So I read books like that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Sue, do you have a favorite author?
Well, been reading for a very long time. My mom used to take lots of books out of the library, and they were on the Times bestseller list. And as soon as she finished the book, I would take the book before we returned them to the library. So there was a whole host of authors like Jack London and Mary Stewart, and just lots and lots of wonderful books. The first book I ever read was Annie Oakley's biography, and I was so proud that I was able to read that because I was quite young. But anything by Rosamund Pilcher, I think she's a wonderful author. Any of her books are absolutely lovely, and I have all the paperbacks, and they're well worn because I pick them up like old friends. But my favorite of hers is The Shell Seekers. And another book I read not too long ago was Walter Isaacson's The Winter Fortress, about the Germans trying to make heavy water for the war effort and the Norwegian resistance against that. And sometimes you read and it takes a while to get into a book. I was hooked in 6 sentences. I went back to check. And I was hooked. I had to read this book. It was for a book club, and it was absolutely wonderful writing.
Oh, thank you. I'm taking notes as you're talking. That sounds like a great book club book. Thank you. Laura, all-time favorite or favorite authors?
This is a pretty hard question because I'm growing, so a lot of my interests are like changing every couple months. Recently, I would say my favorite author at the moment is I've been reading a lot of John Green books because they reflect on a lot of the teenage experience. So it's a lot of these people are unique in their own way, and it's talking about like a lot of like real world problems. As for my favorite book, I have a lot of favorite books actually. I recently read a book called American Panda, which I had to read for an English project, where we had to pick a book based on a common theme. So I picked American Panda, and I found it really interesting because it talked about like a college student who's struggling with her identity and struggling with like all the expectations that are put on her, and it's like also about like sort of like the teenage experience. And then there is also this book called Turtles All the Way Down by John Green, which talks about a girl who has OCD. So John Green does a really good job of talking about like the thought process of all of these characters, so you can really like feel what the person is feeling. So I found it very interesting, like, because John Green himself has OCD. So I found it really interesting to see how he like put his experience into like the everyday actions of this girl. Yeah.
Thank you. I enjoy John Green too. Did he also write An Abundance of Catherines?
Yeah,
Is that written by him?
Yeah, I just finished it. That was actually a really like unique book. I didn't expect that. Yeah.
Right, because his other books are serious, kind of, right, with some serious themes. But An Abundance of Catherines was just hilarious.
Yeah, maybe a lot. Yeah.
Great book to read. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robin?
I would say Judy Blume. As I got older, I didn't really start reading books until, well, let's see, probably the 6th grade, because I had a reading problem, and I never read books. I was playing baseball. I played sports, and so I had a wake-up call. So ever since 6th grade, every summer I read 10 to 12 books. And now I inspired my son, because when we got him, we read to him every day, and now he loves books. We baby, and Priya, he was going to Thursday baby time when he was an infant. Mm-hmm. So it works. Take your child early, and it works. Now he's a lover of reading. And then growing up, I didn't have, I don't remember any high school novels I really liked, because they were all, not to offend the men, but white men. I didn't have a lot of diversity. The Long Island school that I went to was basically just white men, and I didn't really relate to any of them. And until I got older in life, I started reading books by Carolyn Myers on healing, psychic healing, Brene Brown, which writes a lot about courage, daring greatly, and to all the authors here, one of the themes she talks about is courage, how it takes a lot of courage to write. It takes a lot of courage to be on the forefront, and to actually try to sell your book, which could be pretty uncomfortable and pretty vulnerable at the time. So Brene Brown is one of my biggest writers besides David McCloud, because I do a lot of audiobooks in my car, and I like the pioneers. I read the book John Adams. I like to learn a lot about American history, about the Revolutionary War. I love reading the books about founding mothers. So that's what I like to do. That's the kind of books that I like to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Patience, favorite authors, favorite book?
Hello, everyone. Before I go on, I want to say, David, Laura, DT, you guys, you inspire me. Keep going. I'm so proud of you. When we moved to Shrewsbury, we were living in Worcester, so she started Head Start when she was there, and before you go to kindergarten, right? So when she got to Shrewsbury, her reading was really below standard. So now she is an excellent reader, and she gets awards for the literature night, or whatever night they call it. So I see reading is amazing, and you librarians, you're doing good. This girl, I think she will live in the library one day. So my favorite author, I grew up in Ghana, in West Africa. So in school, we are made to read books. And one of my favorite authors, Ibi, you might know this man, he's called Chinua Achebe. Have any of you heard about him? Oh my goodness. I was immersed in that book. I read it over and over. He describes, I'm not from Nigeria, but I know every word for word. And it makes you feel like you are there and you can understand what was happening in the culture. So that was my favorite book. And some of the lines, because it was in class, we had to recite them and say them. Think apart, the center cannot hold, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, all those things. So he became my favorite of all times. May his soul rest in peace. And now, being in the personal development industry, I am an international certified corporate trainer, so I have to develop myself all the time before I can develop someone else. So my favorite book now is by John Whitmore. It's for coaching for performance. So I read that oftentimes to polish up myself as a life coach so I can train people and get them back on their life path. And then my other all-time favorite book that I think I'll read till I leave this earth is by a lot of authors. A lot of authors wrote that one, so that is what I read. So that's what I wanted to share. And most of my friends are authors, so it gets, like you said, one of you said, it opens you up, Robin, to be very vulnerable. You get to know the person beyond just what you see on the outside. There are hidden stories and what they will not really share, but if you read their book, you get to know that part of them. So that is mine. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all so much. This has been a fascinating discussion. I don't think we would have interacted so much even if we had been at the library at the author showcase, because then we would have had to share you with all the people who came into the library. So this has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you all for taking the time. Thank you for participating, and hope to see you all at the library sometime soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priya.
Thank you so much for having
Thanks for having us.